this is just a little skeleton of what I'm going to show you next. But like I've been saying, thoughts, they're automatic. They just arise in mind. And when they do, they affect your physiology. So it could be cortisol, adrenaline, or maybe it's you're in love and you got lots of oxytocin going and opiates. And it's a direct nanosecond, right? So what you think affects what's going to happen on an autonomic level for you. It will also affect emotions, sad, angry, scared, happy, automatic, no choice in the beginning. Behaviors, you have a choice. A lot of us don't think we do, though, right? You know? So my cousin, who's also a psychologist and has written a number of books, one which is the Beck Diet Solution, she talks about that and this, and she said, you know, it's like you can go to somebody's house and you had a plan, like you're only going to eat 3 cookies, and there's a plate of cookies on the table, and you, like, ate them all. And she said, you said, I wasn't even thinking about it. Like, I had no thought. I don't even remember doing that. She said, but you didn't eat the coaster. So there was some thinking about it, right? But we were just sort of a little mindless about it at the moment. But we really can sort of feel that we're in that state like we don't have a choice. So it's just that sometimes that choice is that our behavior is so impulsive or so reactive that it takes us time to sort of slow down that reaction. And that's the good news. We do have choice about that, and then we do have choice about how do we manage, calm down our physiology and our emotions. By the way, I think of emotions as not sort of subjective but objective, because they're just a description of a mood state that has arisen because of what the brain is telling it. So here's the threat defense system that I was talking about, that the threat defense system gets turned on the self, and now we attack ourselves more often than attacking some, lion or tiger or bear that's coming at us. So fight, flight, or freeze. The fight is sort of, we attack ourselves and through self-criticism. Shouldn't have done that. Can't believe you did that again. When are you ever going to learn? You screwed up. I used to say to myself, because one of my kids was very difficult, medically and behavior, a real challenge, and sort of jokingly, after I've unskillfully interacted with her around something, I'd say to myself, such an asshole. Such an asshole. But, I sort of like joking, but you know what? That wasn't actually very helpful. I mean, what would have been a little more helpful might have to say to myself something like, this is such a struggle. This is such a struggle. And, overall, I'm doing a pretty good job. I'm really not perfect. I am going to lose it at times. And so would anybody else dealing with her. So that's more of a kind or compassionate way that we might respond to ourselves. Also, if we're critical of ourselves, the flight is that we just might isolate. I'm not going to pick up the phone tonight. I'm not going to text back. I don't want to go out with them this weekend. And we might isolate through overwork, numbing ourselves through alcohol, drugs, compulsive behavior, shopping, gambling, all those things that us humans do to try to feel better. But then we can feel separate, maybe not. If we're at the casino, we feel like we're with all our fellow people at the time, but then maybe later you might feel bad about yourself and different than other people. The freeze is the one that I was talking about how we sort of go through things in our heads. What she said, what did she do, what am I going to say, what I should have said, and it's rumination, it's self-absorption. And that's one that I think we all know We all know some about all of this because we all do this. Some of us do one of those, maybe more than others. And in certain diagnostic categories, of course, we're going to see the person who's more obsessive and anxious. We're going to see this. The person who, let's say, is depression might tend to isolate us more and not want to be with people because everybody else is doing well and I'm not. So the good news about this, since this happens, is that there are antidotes. And one is, first of all, the first thing is you got to recognize, well, oh, this is what I'm saying to myself. Once you recognize it, there are antidotes that we can use. And the antidote for self-criticism is to be kind. This is to be self-compassion. Treat yourself like you want somebody else to treat you, the way you might treat a friend, who's struggling with maybe the same thing, that you may have some kind words, not want to criticize that person. And the other is knowing you're not alone. Like, we're all the same. We really are. But we're like snowflakes. So like snowflakes are all sort of made of the same thing, but each one is unique. Right? But we are really all the same. And we all mess up. And we all have bad days. And we all make mistakes. And we all suffer when people die. And bad things happen in our lives. We are part of a common tribe of humanity. But a lot of times we don't feel that because, well, first of all, we're not living in tribal situations anymore. We're isolated in our little spaces and separated from people. Or maybe we're connected through social media, but it may not be face to face. And if you're lucky, maybe you have a nice network of companions and relatives. But the way that we live today, we can more feel different than alike than others. Mindfulness is about being in the present with what's happening without judgment, being aware. That means I'm not ruminating and self-absorbed. I can just say, okay, this is anger. We stick with feeling and even kind of where it is in the body or the emotion, and we don't try to go into the story. We say, like, drop the story. Because when we go with the story, it's like, take a little kerosene and just put it on that fire. Right? And it keeps it going. So what we resist, let's say, difficult emotions, persists. You resist it, it persists. If you fight what you're experiencing, let's say, like anxiety, well, then you develop an anxiety disorder, and then you develop panic disorder. So the more you fight something, the worse it gets. It's counterintuitive. We're built to move away from pain, right? But you have to go toward pain, actually, to heal it when it's more on the psychological level. What we can feel, we can heal. Right? So if we can just feel. Feelings are not that scary, if you just feel them and don't do the story. It's a story that raises the cortisol and is very emotionally and adrenaline. That's emotionally painful. But if you can just acknowledge it, they actually sort of dissipate more on their own. So these are the antidotes, and this is Paul Gilbert's work in terms of the physiology of the threat defense system. He has some really good videos out on YouTube. He's funny, so he's interesting to watch. Really, like I said, a proponent for you can't let yourself get away with talking to yourself that way. You gotta change it. And nobody can do it for you. Like, no one else can really make you feel better if you feel inadequate in some way or down on yourself than you. Because we don't buy everything everybody else tells us either. So we have to be telling ourselves more helpful thoughts, so that we can actually, the more we fake it, we make it. If you can feel it, you begin to see that what the truth and reality is more. And we are building new neural pathways. And they're building now, instead of from the back to the front, the frontal cortex. Frontal cortex is more in charge. And it's like running the show more. From the front to the back, over that reptilian brain that's just reactive about everything that's going on so that we can survive. So an interesting study that was done recently, anybody familiar with Henry Benson, the Benson Institute? So Benson has been at Beth Israel for decades, and he's been looking at the benefits of working with the relaxation response, so to decrease the stress system that gets activated for us. And used a lot of strategies with mindfulness and yoga and thinking differently. But now he's moved over to MGH, and he's looking at practices of how they affect our genes. So one of the most recent studies out of his group was that he had people meditate for 20 minutes a day for 12 weeks. And he evaluated the DNA before and then after the study. The 20 minutes of meditation could be a guided meditation, a repetition of a word, a following of the breath, maybe a chant. But they were different. At the end of the study, he looked at the genes, and what he found is that this practice turned on helpful genes and turned off harmful genes. So the telomeres are end at the DNA strands, which as we get older, they get more brittle or getting more solid. But when they're more brittle, they start to break off. We get more inflammation in the body, and inflammation leads to disease. So our cardiovascular diseases, maybe some arthritis. Arthritis, we have inflammation. So it was really an impressive study to know that 20 minutes a day. And actually, I have found out that I actually have a very high inflammation rate in my body. And even though I meditate, it obviously hasn't gotten it down enough. So I figure I got to do 20 minutes a day to help with this, and 30 minutes a day of walking. So we know that those are factors that we can use, but to know that actually this meditation piece does it. We're keeping our brain kind of in a different place. It's in that work state rather than the resting state, looking for trouble. You go looking for trouble, what do you find? We find it, right? We find those problems. So we're just to see more and more of this stuff coming out. And it's just wonderful to have the science behind this work. You can read these studies too in journals that are more accessible, like Scientific American. They did one in December 2014, a great article, and it shows the brain in all these different states, and by color what's fired up when we're in default mode network, and what it looks like when we're meditating, and then even what it looks like when we are doing a compassion practice, which is even better of what happens in our brains. So very exciting stuff.